D.C. residents sue city over cannabis dispensaries in their neighborhoods. A group of Northwestern D.C. residents, as well as one of D.C.'s advisory neighborhood commissions, is going to court to stop a new cannabis dispensary from opening up, saying the location they've chosen are too close to the schools and the city isn't listening to their concerns. The case has been appealed to the D.C. Court of Appeals and was filed by a group called 1,000 Feet, which is made up of residents in D.C.'s Palisades neighborhood, as well as ANC-2C. I'm not totally sure what that acronym means. Says, we want to protect D.C.'s kids from unnecessary exposure to drugs, says Lucy Sullivan, speaking on behalf of 1,000 Feet. We don't believe that marijuana stores should operate across the street or next door to schools, and the D.C. government has been allowing that, and we think it's a real danger to kids and communities. Currently, the city requires 300 feet of distance between cannabis dispensaries and the schools or daycare facilities, but there are some loopholes in the law. Sullivan said even 300 feet is too lenient and said that the city should abide by the 1,000 feet rule described in the Federal Drug Free School Zone Act, which prohibits the sale of illegal drugs within 1,000 feet of public or private schools. There is a federal law that has been put in place to protect children to ensure their safety and their health. We think that the D.C. government needs to abide by that law, says Sullivan. Efforts to protest the license for Green Theory, the dispensary opening and operating on MacArthur Boulevard Northwest, were thrown out by D.C.'s Alcohol, Beverage, and Cannabis Administration for lack of standing. They want to have the right to protest and the right to be heard, said Mark Lytle, who is suing D.C. on behalf of ANC-2C, which is trying to stop a dispensary from opening up in the Penn Quarter neighborhood. He said in the case of the 1,000 Feet group, they were stymied because they lacked the support from their local ANC. We have not had a voice in this process, so the process itself also needs to change, says Sullivan. We believe that the kids and communities deserve a voice and have a say in this, and we're hoping that the courts will agree. Lytle is hoping the case could lead to some federal intervention, too. Congress has the authority to allow the Department of Justice to enforce the 1,000 feet rule, said Lytle. And we think that maybe this will bring some attention to the issue and might get some help from the congressional authors who are writing any riders or things that limit the Department of Justice from taking some action. Green Theory, which is the dispensary in question, and the ABCA did not return calls and emails to further comment on this matter. But I would bank on the fact that our High at 9 watchers and listeners have something to say about this topic. So I'm going to kick it back to everybody. This is Mandy Tingler, a.k.a. Carmen Sacramento, coming at you live for High at 9 News on Wednesday morning. What say y'all?
NIMBY is real.
Yeah, right. NIMBY. But at the same time, I mean, most jurisdictions have a distance that you can be from a school, or you need to not be from a school, and so I don't see the big hype as far as what this store is really having to gripe about, because I mean, you're not supposed to be that close to a school.
I mean, the store is not the complainer. The store is this 1,000 Feet organization who thinks that 300 feet is too close to schools.
Well, if you look across a lot of municipalities, most municipalities have 1,000 foot to a 500 foot buffer from schools. I mean, California has a 600 foot buffer. So I don't think that they're that far out of the question. I mean, there's only one municipality in California that I know that has actually no buffer with a school zone, and there's other cities that have less than 600 feet distance to a school as far as their city regulation.
Let me turn this into an interview, Mr. Beck.
Yeah.
Are there liquor stores within the 1,000 feet of these schools?
Look, we're not. You know what? If I was to flip a coin, I would say, yeah. I would bet that yes, there was. But at the same time,
are there sex toy shops within 1,000 feet of these schools?
We all know the hypocrisies in regards to this, Luke. Like I'm just saying that, like, when you get into cannabis, you know what the rules of the game are. Okay, and so to assume that this wouldn't happen is just a misstep by this company.
No, it's not that though, bro. But just because the rules are there doesn't mean that they're just rules and doesn't mean that they should be followed. Mm-hmm. So I would practice civil disobedience in some of these areas, not necessarily in this one. I'm not suggesting people get their business shut down, but in certain areas where it just doesn't make sense, like this is just morally a dumb law, and this is just stupid. Like, oh, we got to hide the dispensaries in the worst parts of the town in the industrial areas, and it's like
even around schools though, Luke, they're all designated as drug-free zones, and you get charged with higher offenses when you get busted doing stuff like that in those drug zones proximity to school. So it's the same even for criminals.
Well, no, that was a product of the DARE program, was the whole drug-free school enhancements on that area, because that
regardless of what it was, it is
in the inner cities, brother. That's where a lot of the people congregate, is around the basketball court and the schools.
Yep.
And that's what
parks, all that. Yeah, anyhow, exactly.
We won't get into that. That's a whole nother issue. But my point is this: let's not be hypocrites. The word hypocrite and hypocrisy comes from the Greek word, which means to use masks. And we use two different masks. Mm-hmm. And we see you and you're in one mask, and when we see you, you're in another mask. So let's just wear the same mask for cannabis or for alcohol or for whatever else the vice is that the conservative Christians of America don't want us to have around their kids.
Fair enough.
Well, what's the stated purpose? I mean, that's where I keep falling back to, is if we're going to restrict things, okay, what are you restricting and why? And that's where this whole thing falls apart, because as Luke points out, it's hypocritical, because up the street and around the corner is a bar, okay, and across the street is a market where you can buy retail liquor, but you can't have someone have a cannabis store. And we understand the hypocrisy. I understand the NIMBYs and all that kind of shit. But tell us, what is your purpose? To protect children? Okay, well, protect them from what? Because drugs and alcohol now have become basically synonymous. If you're a drunk, okay, or if you're a crack addict, you still are a problem to society. So what are we trying to protect kids from here? Okay, and that's where the argument just falls apart. Because if you say we're going to protect them from drugs, yeah, well, drugs and alcohol, how do you separate them when it comes to protecting kids from it? Because guess what? Kids know that people are smoking weed. Okay, let's just plainer. They know their parents have a glass of wine. They're standing in the market, and behind them is the liquor aisle, and in front of them's whatever the latest holidays toys and candy are. Okay?
Well, Dale,
the fucking hypocrisy is hard to deal with.
Not to mention that, but kids can tell when the air smells different.
How about the 1,000 feet crew should say, we don't put schools 1,000 feet from power lines or toxic waste dumps or any other thing that these legislators have their money invested in.